Hi everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Brandon Acker. I'm a YouTuber, musician, director of an online music school, Arpeggiato. And today I'm really excited to meet someone whose work I've been following for a long time, mostly on YouTube. Rob MacKillop is a multi-instrumentalist based in Edinburgh, Scotland. I thought I personally played a lot of instruments, but Rob has me beat. He plays classical guitar, jazz guitar, lute, theorbo, baroque guitar, vihuela, mandolin, banjo, ukulele, baroque guitar, machete. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Rob?
Yeah, machete.
Machete. Thank you. Baglama, Cittern, among many, many others. So just trust me, go to his channel, and you'll be amazed at the amount of variety you see in here. He has published over a dozen books through Melbay, including an introduction to the lute, Bach cello suites for plectrum guitar, tunes from 17th century Scotland for mandolin, Scottish 18th century guitar tunes, and there's just so much more there. So a quick Google search will yield a lot of really fascinating books. He's also a prolific recording artist. His YouTube channel has over 636 videos. He's got over 21,000 subscribers and 4 million views there. His website is robmacillop.net, where there's so much information. It's just a wealth of information on different instruments and subjects that we're going to dive into today, like playing the guitar without nails, for sure. So, hey, Rob, it's so nice to meet you finally face to face.
Hi, Brandon. Yeah, I mean, I watch your channel a lot, and it's great to be interviewed by you. Here you are on my computer talking to me.
I'm used to seeing you on my computer, just not used to realizing I can actually have a conversation with you.
You scared me there when you said 4 million views. Jeez, that's a lot. That's a lot of views. Yeah, I'm just surprised at that.
Yeah, isn't it? It's just amazing. Yeah. I mean, maybe we can start there. Actually, I don't know what your experience has been like, because, I mean, I don't think that either of us necessarily started out thinking, I'm going to do is make a lot of videos on YouTube. And so, how did it start for you? How did you start making YouTube videos?
One day I did a concert in Edinburgh, and this time I'd had a number of number one albums in the Scottish classical music chart, and I expected to have an audience, but 6 people turned up, 6, and two of them were my wife and daughter, and one was the janitor, so it was actually 3 paying people. And just before I left the house, I'd put a video on YouTube, and I came back after the gig, and there were 400 views. And I thought, wow, this is my platform from now on. This is how I can reach people. And slowly but surely, it grew into a channel. I'd never really heard the term subscribers before, but it kind of started getting subscribers. So it was realizing that concert career is a difficult thing to keep going. And here was an easier way to reach people. It's not the same as having a live concert,
right?
But I can reach far more people, and which is quite nice.
Speaking about being on YouTube and everything, the one topic that has garnered the most attention on YouTube, from your videos in the guitar world and many of my recent videos in the guitar world, have been the topic of playing the classical guitar without nails. I knew of you before, and I found you playing theorbo and lute and classical guitar pieces. But it was only when COVID hit and I decided to do all the things I normally wouldn't do, which is grow a beard, cut off my nails, play gut strings, all the things I felt I didn't have time to do in my professional concert career because I had a concert the next day. How could I just change my technique drastically? And so one of the things that happened was I cut my nails off, and to search for the right touch while you're having that inevitable panic that every classical guitarist who's only ever played with nails for 15 years has, of they cut off their nails and they touch the guitar and they play and they instantly go, well, this was a huge mistake. What a nightmare. All my technique is bad. Playing without nails is a terrible idea. No one should ever do it. And I'll make sure to tell my students, you have to play with nails. So while having that panic, I'm like, surely this must be, I know this is a valid technique because I know the history. I know about Carcassi and Sor and Targa late in his life, but also just since the Renaissance, all the people who played through the Baroque period with and without nails. And so if you're like us, perform in the early music world, there it's almost the opposite. You know, you get made fun of if you play with nails. But in the end, there are happy, techniques that I think I heard you say once that can happily coexist, and I like that very much. So that's where I've really paid the most attention to your content and found out you had a wealth of information on the subject. So I've been telling my YouTube audience about the topic for a while, and they always mention you whenever I mention no nails. You have to talk to Rob MacKillop. So now that we're here, why do you play without nails? How'd that start?
Well, how did it start? I finished at the Royal Scottish Academy of Music. And at that point, I was playing nothing but lute arrangements on the guitar. And apart from some avant-garde pieces, which I still love playing. And I thought, well, I need to get a lute. And so I came out of my final recital and I just bit my nails off.
Wow.
I declared myself a lute player, and I decided that even though I didn't have a lute, I'm a lute player. And eventually in London, I picked up it was an arch lute of all things. It was my first one, and it's the only one I could find, And so I bought that, and immediately I started getting calls to join various ensembles in Scotland, and I was kind of the only active lute player for a while. There was a lot of work coming my way, and so I had to learn pretty quickly. I mean, within 3 months of getting this big arch lute and not even knowing how to tune it, but everyone was so positive, and I had a lot of experience playing gigs and so on, and then recordings came, and it just got sucked into it. It was like I suddenly hit this conveyor belt. It was moving really fast, and whereas all my classical guitar friends were still doing Villa-Lobos preludes, and I love them, but I've heard them enough. And suddenly I was shooting along, doing all sorts of repertoire, and I had to get other instruments. And the only way I knew of playing the lute was without nails. So I was learning the lute from scratch without nails. So I didn't realize what it would be like playing lute with nails. Now, we both know that historically, occasionally you hear of someone who played with nails, but it tends to be fairly rare. But I think there's a relationship between Baroque guitar and theorbo. Baroque guitarists playing with nails, theorbo players playing with nails. I think those two, very often they were
makes sense.
Yeah, and they were apart from the lute players who were playing without nails. Largely.
Corbetta, Piccinini. The two obvious examples of for people who don't know, Corbetta is a famous Baroque guitar player who I think he taught a famous king or something. Did he teach Charles II or something?
Charles II, yeah.
And he famously broke a nail before some important concert, and that's on record. And so that's one reason we know. And then Piccinini, in a preface in Italian, talks about playing with nails and how to shape them, and the Dio playing back and forth with the finger. And so there is evidence for it. But you're right; it's not. It doesn't seem to be ubiquitous by any means, and as prevalent as, for example, nails are today, at least in terms of how they wrote.
But this brings me, I'm just thinking, it brings me to a subject I'm becoming more aware of these days, is that we've brought the lute and the early instruments back to life, and we don't own their future. We can help create their future, and lots of people are bringing different skills to the lute that maybe when I was learning, it wasn't happening. Everyone was playing without nails. Everyone was trying to recreate the early styles. And so I got into authentic playing, with gut strings and the right instruments and so on, pitches, temperaments, all this stuff, and ornamentation. And so you do a lot of research and, experimentation. But now there's a whole new group of younger people with maybe a rock guitar background coming in, playing the lute, bringing in different ideas. And I'm beginning to think, at first I was quite annoyed with somebody, that's not the way they did things. And then they start saying early music police. And I said, well, and I got confused for a while because I say, hold on, the people who you accuse of being early music police were just curious about how things were at a different time. And we spent a lot of time just trying to find out, not about me, but about these people. How did they play, and what feelings were they having? Why did they write the music they wrote?
Right.
Whereas now I'm beginning to think, well, actually, we've been through that period, and the lute's alive now, and people can play it with nails, a plectrum, whatever they want to do. They can, as long as they're not saying this is how it was done historically.
Exactly.
They can arrange pop music on it, heavy metal. I believe that you've been shredding, and it's a new world has opened up for the lute. And I think even Nigel North has hinted at this in a comment I heard him say. I can't remember it, so I can't quote it exactly, but he felt that there was. It's a new world now for the lute.
Interesting.
And so we've got these.
I think of him as usually as one of the more by the book players. Brilliant for that.
But look at his right hand is very different. Right hand, he's moving a lot. Well, I suppose Piccinini would be happy with that. But it's, I don't know. Nigel's wonderful. He's one of my heroes. But it's. I think he's aware that this is a new world now. And some people can go and try and recreate the past, and some people can say, give me that instrument, I want to write new music and do things differently. And I think that's good.
It's a little bit like it reminds me a bit about the oud, which is an instrument with an even older tradition than the lute. And we think of the lute as being so old in the Renaissance, and it has its own history. And it was this noble instrument. It's like but the oud has double the history, And at the same time, how is the oud being played in infinite styles, and yet the oud shines through with its own nature, its own idioms, and when you take an oud and you apply it to various styles, you get something, a new mix of something, the flavor of the oud, but with jazz. And I've heard people do oud. My colleague Alain Serial just released a Bach CD called Plucked Bach on oud, arch lute, baroque guitar, and he did some C minor Bach works on the oud, and it's one of the most beautiful things I've heard. It's so refreshing. And so if we look at that as an example. It seems to make sense that the lute has kind of the same destiny, where, as you say, people can say, "I'm wearing my historical hat. Let's try to see if we can recreate based on the writings, the paintings, everything, our intuition, what they did." And at the same time, this is an instrument. Let's play it. And if I want to solo in a pentatonic, scale, it'll sound good too.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Seeing it in a new light. I just don't like it when people say this is how they played it in the past when it clearly wasn't.
Right.
But if you're just saying this is me playing the lute and this is what comes out, then fine. I mean, I'm in Scotland, and the Scottish repertoire from the 17th century. Many of these tunes, you can hear them being played on bagpipes and buskers in Edinburgh. You can go to bars and hear folk musicians play them. The stuff's alive still, the music's alive. And here's an original instrument that's too quiet to play in these bars or in the streets, but it draws you in. And it's a different experience. But I'm not too happy about amplification of lutes and so on. So, I get it why people do it. They have to be heard in bigger context. But just my personal playing, I like a more intimate ambience around lute playing and one-to-one. It's a good thing about video, is a kind of paradoxical thing. I feel I'm playing to one person, you know,
Right.
and you know, a few thousand will hear it, but and it's just me and the microphone.
Well, if you think about the proximity of, like, in terms of what your eyes see, that the viewer takes the position of sitting in a chair directly across from you, or depending on how fancy you get with cameras, their head would have to be right here next to your hand. You get a close up in a way that you never would get in a real concert. The person would be this small, and so it's a more intimate experience in that way. And you can hear them breathing with the microphone.
Yeah.
We both close mic our instruments,
Yeah.
and it feels like you're just in their room by them, watching them play. And I agree with you. And somehow
I like that.
it's
And
intimate.
Mary Burrell, I've mentioned this before, said the maximum audience, I think she said, for a lute should be 3 people. And that's great. It's too many. Just 1-to-1 is, and we can do that via YouTube somehow.
Yes.
It's
Wasn't there something? I thought I read something once, because they're in fear that a mouse will make a sound or something, or cover up the sound of the lute. I heard something like that at some point. I completely agree with you. And I personally don't like to amplify my lute either. And it's funny, I've never heard you say that, but I've been saying that for a while. That's my favorite thing about early guitars and the lute, is that it pulls you in. And I think that's the magic for me that I've realized in my own concertizing as well.
Yeah.
My professors always critiqued me for playing too soft in studio class. They say no one can hear that, and I'd always be trying to find the bottom. What's the smallest sound I can make? Because then I think when you establish that to the audience, okay, that's the lowest sound I can make, and then their ears acclimate. They kind of lean forward, and then suddenly when you play your version of forte, which is not as loud as a trumpet or anything, it blows you back, because you've established a new relative perception of dynamics.
It's a big tip for performers, and never start with a loud piece. Because people adjust to that, and everything else they'll have a problem hearing. But draw them in first, and then you can expand the dynamic subtly, and it makes a big difference.
Today's video is brought to you by Classical Guitar Pro. That's my brand new online classical guitar course, which is 6 hours, 53 videos. It's a whole curriculum designed to teach you what you would normally learn in the first 6 months to a year of classical guitar lessons. So if you want to learn classical guitar but are stuck, struggling reading music, or struggling to learn the techniques, check out classicalguitar-pro.com to learn more. The thing about talking to you, Rob, is I feel like I want to have 1,000 conversations with you. So we can go so many places. Let's make our way back to the topic of no nails, because I think that's where we started here. And you were saying that you cut off your nails when you finished your last exam guitar concert. Then you went right to the lute, and then you were experimenting. You found some beauty in the softness of the lute, how it pulls you in. And then how do you go from doing that and suddenly being sucked into the world of being a professional early music continuo player and traveling and all that? How do you go from that to back to the guitar, but with a completely different mindset? Yeah,
well, I was doing a concert in Japan, a series of concerts in Japan. And it's hard to believe now, it's so long ago, it seems like a dream. But I was at probably the top of my career. I was doing a BBC Radio 3 recital, which was a big thing, a solo concert and live on BBC Radio 3, and touring Japan, and I had a #1 album and stuff like this. And I said, amazing. Well, it sounds, I've made it, but we still have a daughter. She was very young, and a baby, and I decided I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be the absentee father, and anyone who's seen my video on 50 years of guitar playing or being a musician, will know I have father issues. So I just decided I want to be there. And I never regretted it. I decided to give up there and then, being a performer, when I was in Japan. And I came back home. This is when I took a job in a library, stacking shelves and so on. But I soon got tired of that, and I ended up teaching. Now I needed to get back into guitar, so I started playing guitar again, but I had this lute technique, and then I tried to find some hybrid way between guitar technique and lute technique. And I realized the guitars were not set up the way I would like them. I think I was playing a Ramirez or something, a 1A, and a big guitar, and you need a lot of strength to really play these instruments.
Yeah, very high tension, very loud.
High action.
Yes.
I know you like a low action. I still like a high tension, but a high action, but with a low tension.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, we're different there. We can discuss that later. But
Sure.
I felt, I'm not quite doing it with the classical guitar. There's something not quite right here. So I went back to historical guitars and started playing Lacotte and Panormo type instruments, and playing a lot of Fernando Sor and a no-nail player, and a great advocate of no-nail playing. He couldn't abide nails, even though his best friend Aguado was playing with them, and his duet partner. So I realized that there was something in the construction of the guitar, and then using gut strings, which I'm a great advocate of. A different sound world was more lute-like, but had some unique qualities as well. And so I found myself really getting into that style of guitar playing, doing the historical thing. Let's go back and see what Sor was playing, and his Lacottes and Panormos, and doing his repertoire with no nails, and reading his method book, which is one of the most incredible method books ever written for the guitar. It's just unbelievable.
Yes. I'll see if I can find a link to that, and there's an English translation.
Yes. Yeah, Merrick. Yeah, it's wonderful. There's not a lot of music in it. There's a lot of dialogue, and he talks. Anyway, that's a big subject. But I was doing Fernando Sor and with gut strings, and there was something that I was connecting with again. It got me back into guitar playing. The touch that I developed through lute playing, it was a very subtle touch. I could bring into early 19th century guitar. And then one day I was at someone's house, and he put in my hands this guitar. It looked beautiful, and he says, "That's a Torres guitar." And I said, "Wow, this is a Torres guitar," and I played it, and this was the most amazing thing. And it was very light, resonant, spoke beautifully. And then he said, "And here's a manuscript that Tarraga wrote for one of his students, Walter Leckie, and this is the original manuscripts." And so I was sitting there with a Torres playing Tarraga's handwriting. It's beautiful. And there's Granada by Albéniz and things like that. And I said, well, it doesn't get more early music than this. I've got the right instrument. I've got the original manuscript in the guy's handwriting. Not a facsimile. This is the real thing. And which is now available in a facsimile. But at the time, it was, wow, this is incredible. And so that just made me aware of Torres-style guitars. And they reminded me a little bit of flamenco guitars, just a little. And so sometimes I play flamenco guitar with gut strings, and you get it's a kind of fairly inexpensive way of getting a little bit of that vibe of what a Torres is like. But nowadays, it's very trendy. Everyone's making Torres copies, and it's great. There's a whole new world.
I just got a new one, actually. This is a Brian Itzkin homage, he likes to call it, because he did a couple his own personal things, but the beautiful bird's eye, very blonde. He kind of changed the rosette a little bit, but it's still kind of, for me, it looks similar. And it's just really a well done instrument that I've been really enjoying over the last few months since he sent it to me. But I'm definitely in the Torres phase at the moment, where I don't want to go further than Torres at the moment. It's like it's my most modern I want to go.
Well, that's a way for my technique to, especially with gut strings, especially at a lower pitch. And I know this is a controversial subject,
but something we
pitch.
totally agree on. I mean, the lowering the pitch, I think, is sort of something that doesn't even cross one's mind when you go through modern conservatories or you watch a lot of, you listen to a lot of recordings and things. The topic of changing pitch, unless you're really in the early music world, then it's like every gig, the first question is what's our pitch? You know, in the same day you can change a half step, depending on what you're doing. But it's true that this is not I think, as known as it should be, when it sounds so, I don't know, probably obvious to you and me now. And my guitar goes up and down, and so much it seems to be used to it. But yeah, I mean, what were you going to say exactly? I mean, how do you feel about changing the pitch now? And is this something you advise other guitarists to do?
Well, you know, there's two things. One is your own personal relationship with sound that you're making, the instrument, your technique, and how it feels to you. And that is probably the most important thing. The secondary thing is the tradition of how these things were played, and you know, in terms of pitch. So I'm more and more. It sounds wrong, but becoming selfish. In other words, I find my voice through the instrument, the way I can get it to sing. I will play with the pitch. And sometimes I don't know what pitch it is, you know. It's just where the guitar, at a certain time of day, morning or afternoon or evening, will just sound perfect. And if I put the pitch upward to where it's meant to be, it just doesn't sound as good. Now, the same guitar, if I do that in the morning, in the evening, I might have to change the tuning to get that singing quality again. Wow. Because these are incredibly sensitive instruments, you know, especially the Torres type, if it's made well. And the way you handled yours, I could hear, you know, the hands on the instrument, I could hear the noise. It's a very sensitive instrument, which is great. Yeah, and these are extremely sensitive instruments, and they're very affected by humidity, and you know, that can change during the day. So I discovered that every day I need to make a connection again with my instrument and find out where it sings best, you know. And we're talking about small increments here and there, but occasionally, you know, I'll have to drop it a whole tone, you know, and then suddenly it just sounds incredible, you know. So I have abandoned any idea of, you know, an agreed pitch of what a guitar should be. It's your kind of own pitch that you're trying to bring out with the guitar. So it's your voice, after all. It's your voice, and if you feel it sounds right, way down at 392 pitch or something, then that's where it should be. You know, and no matter what anyone else said, no matter what even Tarraga played it, you know, it's you who's playing it in your house. Yeah.
And actually, one thing that's funny about this conversation, because if we're talking about pitch, there's number one, there's the fact that we both are, you know, YouTube musicians as a part of our lives now. And one thing you do find on YouTube is this obsession. Actually, nowadays, the topic is trendy. The idea of pitch is becoming trendy, but for me, kind of somewhat in the wrong direction, with sort of music theory, conspiracy theories around 432 pitch, and you know, things like this that kind of go in the wrong way. But in the same sense, at least it's shattered the idea that there's one way, which is 440. It's opened people's mind up to the idea that lower, higher, something, change it, and it sounds different. And something that occurred to me when I'm thinking a lot about this when I'm on my historical gigs and I'm wearing my historical hat, and you think about, well, there's something special about 392, a whole step low when you play in French Baroque music. We should play at that pitch. And I get it, especially when you play with certain like wind instruments and singers, you know, who maybe it's just not in their register for their voice type. Maybe it's not possible. Sure. But for us, when we can go up and down, I've been wondering, when I'm playing solo, what's the difference? And the thing is, so maybe Targa played at, let's call it, whatever, you know, make it up. Let's say he played at 420. I mean, if we're not using his guitar with gut strings and with the gauges of strings he was using with the same scale length, then those things don't matter, because if we have a different scale length in the same gauge, if we have a different tension, all the factors change. The resulting timbre and sound is a combination of all the factors. I've been kind of doing what you're doing lately and just feeling where the instrument rests. And one piece of advice I'd have for people watching is, rather than take these numbers like as if there was something special about 392 or 415 or 440 or 465, just tune your guitar too low. Tune it so the strings are totally flappy, and then keep going up until you have a sense of, I can use that. And then whatever that is, just play, and it'll be very, very low, and then move it up a bit, and then play, and to keep doing that, and eventually check with your tuner, and you'll experience the full spectrum of, okay, with too little tension, I simply can't play the instrument. At some point, it becomes interesting, but it's still, the strings are too floppy. And then there's a whole spectrum that's usable with an amazing variety of sounds and a compromise of volume and intensity and charm. And that, for me, just doing that sweep in one sitting, playing below a whole step down, all the way up, you learn more than anyone can describe to you in words.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely the way. I really strongly believe that you should be fashioning your instrument to reflect you and how you feel about music and the instrument and how it sounds to you. And forget everything else, the noise that goes on. I've had people yelling at me, it should be 4-3-2, that's what Tarrega played at. I can't imagine Tarrega had an instrument that would tell him it was exactly 4-3-2, not 4-3-3, 4-3-1. It's just, how do you know? And even if we did know that, it doesn't matter. As you say, it's a different world. You're the one with your instrument in your room playing, and just play, get the most beauty you can find in the music and in the instrument. It's to me, it's simple. Forget what people tell you. Just explore your instrument. I mean, I used to sit for hours, when I think about it, hours, playing single notes just on the instrument, and not trying to play scales faster and faster, but just trying to hear how the sound would swell and, diminuendo and each single note in different positions and different strings, and how a C on the second string, of course, is different from the C on the third string and the fourth string. But every note has something unique about it in terms of sound, not just pitch. So you slowly get drawn into the incredible beauty of the instrument and your relationship with it. So it's no longer, I don't always have good days, quite often I don't, but on a good day, I don't feel the guitar is there at all. I'm just playing, and it's, I sometimes get that on video. I wish I got it more, but just the idea of, I'm inside this. There's no guitar, Zen-like maybe, I don't know, but it's just, just
I once
get to know your instrument.
I like so much what you said, Rob, and everything you're saying resonates with me so well. I was in a class once, and they had us draw a diagram of of what happens in a concert, like what would you like to happen and what actually happens. And I found myself drawing two pictures. One was, it was me with my guitar, and then there was a barrier of, the space between the audience and me, and then the audience. And my goal, I had an arrow from my mind to the audience's mind. And I realized that was my goal. It wasn't about the instrument or the compressed air and the physics of it. For me, it was about emotional intent, telling a story, and I want to plant that story in their mind, which will move them and will give them an emotional experience. And that's really, and I realized in that moment, like that's it. That's what we're doing. And but then often what happens when I don't give a good concert, or I have technical problems, is the arrow from my head went right to the ground in front of me and never reached them because of. Maybe I had technical problems that covered up my intention. So my dynamics weren't clear, or I couldn't finish a phrase properly. It sounded unnatural because I was unable to play maybe the song was in my head. And somehow you reminded me of that just now, because when you think in that way, yeah, exactly, the instrument is invisible. It's just an extension and an appendage, and it's just a tool to mediate your ideas to the audience. And what I like about that view is we kind of stop obsessing over maybe superficial details about our exact nail length and the brand of strings we're using, and so maybe things that we get super obsessed about, and maybe sometimes we have to, and we can just get right to the art and the meaning, the humanity in what we're doing.
Well, you said something beautiful, and this, I say it a lot, is when you're telling a story, and we're storytellers, musicians, and I get this even with new students who are learning for the first time. Even on a simple piece, you have a story. This piece is a little poem or something, or a description of something, and let's use our imagination and think of what that story could be. And so they suddenly find themselves performing the story and not the piece of music. So they're communicating a story, and eventually they get the technique to be able to do that quicker and more directly. But stories, we're all storytellers. Yeah.
That's very beautiful. It's exactly, and I think it really, when we sum it up that way, it gets to the heart of what we're doing. If you're enjoying this free lesson and are serious about improving on guitar, I'd highly encourage you to check out my online music school, Arpeggiato. This is an online school for plucked instruments. And if you'd like to learn a plucked instrument like guitar, ukulele, bass, lute, or more, or delve deeper into the subject of tablature, we have an assortment of specialists in various instruments and styles who can give you weekly lessons on Zoom. So please check out arpeggiato.com to learn more. I did 2 degrees in classical guitar. I kind of finished.
One wasn't enough.
Well, I was super excited after and I kind of came late to the instrument. I was one of the rock players, and I had my long hair, and I was obsessed with the idea that I was going to be my life was going to be like Kirk Hammett. I was going to be like the lead guitarist of Metallica. That I was going to be touring stadiums, and that was my dream. And I went to college because that's what you did. Serious people went to college, and my friends were going to college, and all I could really think about, I was doing a lot of audio recording projects with my band and recording, and I actually got really into recording and building a studio, and so I thought I'll go for sound recording. So I ended up here in Chicago for a degree in sound recording, and they say you have to have an instrument, choose between and I said, well, I'm a guitarist, and they say choose between jazz and classical, and I said, well, I play rock and metal, that's it. And so I arbitrarily chose classical. So basically, I mentioned that just to say I was just realizing what classical guitar was while in a degree, and then everything changed so fast. So by the time I was serious, I was like, okay, well, now I want to keep doing this, and I went to the masters. But after 6 years of doing it, I found, and actually this might be a good segue to a topic I wanted to talk about, which is the current state of classical guitar in the mainstream world. And not that I want to be negative or anything, but I think we are pretty simpatico on a lot of these topics. And I kind of want to explore it with you a little bit, because my feeling was, by the end of it, I felt sucked into a world which seemed to be obsessed with loud and fast competitions, and mostly playing solo, and it wasn't a social experience. It was an each man for himself kind of approach, which maybe is an inevitable thing of playing as a solo concert competition player. But I wonder what's your take on the mainstream world of classical guitar today, and how would you change it if you could? I mean, what type of influence would you like to have to maybe move the needle a little bit?
For starters, it's a very macho world. It's mainly guys, and that's changing, thankfully. And new ideas are coming in. So when I was teaching, I studied at the Royal Scottish Academy of Music, and then I went back as a teacher. And there were a couple of other teachers, and they asked for ideas, and I came with 3 or 4 pages of ideas, and the other 2 guys didn't really have anything. And my ideas were, let's do historical practice, let's do improvisation, which we know that people used to improvise preludes and so on. And it was just be a bit more creative with this. And it just got ignored, and I eventually left, just found it unproductive. And I get the feeling they were searching for the one, the one player who would go off and have a career. And they weren't too concerned about the others. That was my feeling. And I hate that. And so I prefer teaching one-to-one students who want to study with me. So there's that macho side I didn't like at all. And the emphasis on technique. In my third of 4 years as a student, I decided I wanted to start playing easier pieces, because there's this relentless push, harder and harder, more virtuous pieces. Yeah. And I said, no.
Almost like you're not serious if you're not playing the hardest pieces imaginable.
Exactly. And I said, no, I'm missing something here. I need to get back to simplicity. And it wasn't, I could play the Ranwith concerto. I was a fairly decent, with nails, classical guitar player at the time. But I just felt there was something missing. And I wanted to simplify things. And I almost failed the exam because I was playing pieces that were too simple. But I was playing them in a much more musical way, I thought. And I eventually took that into my final year. So it's sometimes that push to perfection is so, perfection itself is so inhuman. We're not perfect in any way.
Right.
We're kidding ourselves if we think we're perfect at something. And, I've never heard a perfect musician. People come close. You think that was a perfect performance. But it doesn't mean every performance they do is perfect. And it's only perfect because you think it is.
Yes.
So it's hard to gauge. But I would like a move away from abstract virtuosity for its own sake. A move towards, telling stories, being poetic, that kind of thing. Why not? That's what people responded to when they heard Segovia. They didn't hear the kind of virtuoso you hear today. There's people today who can run rings around what Segovia was doing, technically. But they just didn't have it. They just don't have what he had. He could walk out and play a few notes and it would just blow you away. Yeah. I heard Segovia twice. And, I heard him play twice, saw him twice.
I would love to talk about Segovia specifically in a second, but I just want to linger on what you said, because I liked so much how you've summarized how you feel. I just want to point out, maybe for people listening, I'm not interested in telling other people what they're doing wrong, and I don't think you're in the same way. I don't think it's about anything about that. That if you enjoy what you're doing and are finding meaning in it, then it's wonderful. But why are you pointing this out? Why do I agree with you? And why am I saying the same things to my students? Because you run into a dead end if you obsess so much over the means to the end being the storytelling and the means being the technique. But if you only are so obsessed with the technique that you don't ever get to the storytelling, you're missing the goods, in my opinion. And the most beautiful thing. And I do feel like you've described, that there's an emphasis on technique and fast and loud that negates the storytelling. It's as if the virtuosity is the thing that we're there to see. It by itself. I'm so moved, I'm not sure anyone's ever said that, I'm so emotionally moved by how accurate that person was. But I feel as if that was what and no one told me those words, so it wasn't anyone's fault but my own. I came out the other end of my conservatory degrees feeling technique was the end goal, and it burnt me out. I lost meaning. I thought, why am I doing this? There's better players than me. I'll never play as well as X, Y, and Z, these people. And I just finished 2 degrees, so if I can't do that, then what's my purpose? So I lost meaning, and I was searching for other things, and that's how I ended up in the early music world, because I thought, well, my options are win the fastest, loudest, competitions, and or play fast and loud and win these competitions, or I don't know, do something else. So I think this emphasis creates a crisis in musicians of meaning, and for me, I sort of, like you, rediscovered that meaning through simplicity, through early music, through digging deep back into the roots of early instruments and making my way back to the guitar in a way which was revelatory, because when you live in the world of low tension lutes and these subtle instruments which seem so frail, but that's the beauty of them. And then when you sort of rediscover what emerging into the 1800s, the early guitar repertoire, it's incredible. You can't perceive the instrument the same way as you do when you play electric guitar and you go backwards and you think, oh, what is this museum instrument?
I often say that, I came upwards towards Sor from before him, rather than going back to Sor. And it does give you a different perspective. Sor grew out of, the stuff we'd been playing before. It'd gone through traditions and ended up with Sor, and he was hearing new things as well around him, from Mozart to Beethoven and Schubert and so on, and this was beginning to influence him. But he grew up with an instrumental sense of touch on the instrument, and touch was so important. Now, we've been talking about nails and no nails, but it must be said, and I know you're going to agree, the vast majority of people combine the two. So you get a bit of flesh and a bit of nail, so everyone knows what flesh touch is like, and they use the nail to give them a bit of projection, and I understand that. But it's when you get rid of the nail and find a different way of plucking the string, you'll find out, you'll get closer to what Fernando Sor was getting at, and then some of his fingerings start making sense, because he's got some odd fingerings, and the way he used his right hand was odd. His middle and index mainly on strings 1 and 2. Occasionally he'd move them over to 2 and 3, and all the rest was thumb. Occasionally he'd use thumb index. In scales he used a lot of slurs. Very different from modern technique. Yes. And also this sense of strong and weak beats, which seems to have disappeared from a lot of players. Yes. We're taught in modern classical guitar to iron out the differences in the fingers. Well, look at them; they're all different. And why should we iron it out? Why not work with the differences? So the middle finger is the biggest, so let's put that on strong beats. The index is lesser, so let's put that on weak beats. And the thumb is thicker and it's going down with gravity, so that can also be strong. So Sor had this technique, which I know you know, where, and lute players have this, where the thumb and middle finger are strong beats and the index weak. And Sor less so, but it was still around, that idea from the lute. And it's wonderful. So I say to a lot of guitar players, just for a while, forget about your ring finger. Try the B minor study of Sor with just 2 fingers and thumb. Forget your ring finger, and you'll find that for the most part, your middle finger is playing the melody all the time, and you get incredible control. Yes. And sometimes I've noticed that it's like I've assigned this finger to be the singer, and this is the accompanist. And so if you can, even someone like, I know Tarraga didn't play this way, but you play Lagrima with that melody going up the first string. You play it with just the middle finger, always the same finger. It's like a singer. This finger singing. Yes. And I find I get more control over the nuances of a more vocal style. I used to think that the greatest compliment you could ever get is you make the instrument sing, and it's something to be sought after. And there are methods of doing that, and this is one of them. Assign the voice to one finger and see what happens. It won't work with every piece, but some it will. I should mention, I'm not going for a big oratorical singing voice. These days it's more a conversational style like we have just now. If the audience can feel there's a conversation going on, they're listening in, or even the conversations to them. Yes. And it's a very small way, and it can sound very beautiful and intimate. But there's, we talk a lot in early music about oratory. Yes. And oratorical ways of presenting the music and singing. And I sometimes feel that is too big, where for some of the guitar and lute repertoire. It's great when you're doing Monteverdi arias and so on. So I'm not so much concerned about singing through the instrument now as conversing through the instrument. And we talked about storytelling. Yeah, so I'm moving in that way.
I agree with you that the mainstream guitar world needs a heavy dose of learning that inequality is beautiful, and through whether it be through singing or speech, there's something wonderful there about the human brain can pick up strangeness. If I start speaking like this, it doesn't matter if you even speak English. You know that I'm now doing something strange and abnormal. Yeah. But somehow we've normalized bop 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 is kind of the good, even controlled approach, like you were saying. And for me, it goes against everything I feel emotionally in music, and it's the difference, that makes music so interesting. And I had a teacher that was his first exercise when he was he's a Baroque violin player, and he would be teaching us about, what you can do with the touch on the violin. But when the first exercise in the class to sort of shake everyone up and make everyone in the class realize that inequality was beautiful and natural, was he'd go around the room and he'd say, "What's your name?" And I would say, "Brandon Acker." And he would say, "Play that on the first string." And so I grabbed my guitar and I would play, "I'm Brandon Acker." And he'd go, "No, you're Brandon Acker." Listen to your name. All right, Brandon Acker. Ba-da-da-da. Yeah. So strongs and weaks, and you have to figure out, actually, how do I play? Ba-da-ba-da. Exactly. Can I do it with the sensitivity that I do so easily? Because the thing is, you hear the strangest in my voice, and why shouldn't it be as sensitive on the instrument? And the second I realized what he was saying, everything changed from that point on, and I couldn't play pop 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 anymore. And what I'm very surprised to find out that realization hasn't taken place in a lot of playing, and that would be the thing that I wish I could change with a magic wand. Is we could all enjoy that level of nuance that we enjoy in speech, in our playing.
Yeah, I agree with everything you say there. We have a lot of fun with students trying to explore, dynamics of an individual line and how to make it speak. I'm reminded again of Mary Burrell. For those who don't know, she was a 17th century lute player who wrote a diary, and her teacher also, a lot of it seemed to come from her teacher. But she was saying that the wind instruments are the things we sing with, but the lutes we speak with. I thought, wow, that's incredible. And I hadn't thought of that before. So not singing, because I was trying to make everything sing, And so she made me think about that, or her teacher made me think about that. What does it mean to be conversational in music? And we've been having a conversation for a while now, and I haven't once thought about technique of using my voice, or projecting to the back of a hall.
But you're not loud enough, Rob. It's got to be faster.
Yes, exactly. Talk faster. Some people do. I have a very soft, quiet voice, and maybe that's the way I play as well. But it's that conversational style where there's two people, just you and the listener, or even you and the composer when you're on your own. You're just exploring this music. Somebody wrote, some human being wrote this music and attempted to write it down on paper. an inexact medium, if ever there was one. And we have to try and help that come alive, but it's a kind of, I often feel I'm in conversation. I don't believe in spooks or anything, but just a prosaic, a poetic way of saying this. I feel I'm in conversation, me and the composer, or me and the listener, and that's why, in some ways, YouTube for me is more ideal than going out and playing to 300-400 people, because I can feel it's just one person. Now, when I used to play concerts a lot, I tried to get it so it felt as if it was just me and one person in the audience. Everybody in the audience was one person. And rather than trying to reach so many people, you just try and communicate as if it's one person. And it's a difficult thing to do, but I find it easier somehow on YouTube. We all make mistakes, and I maybe make more than many people, but we have to define what a mistake is, and if it's not playing the right note perfectly centered, I'm guilty as charged sometimes, and I'll leave it in the video if it's otherwise a performance I'm happy with, because when I talk, I sometimes mumble, I sometimes say the wrong word or the wrong tense or something, but it doesn't matter because you're understanding what I'm getting at. And if I could get that into playing, these little things don't matter. It's the bigger picture, the bigger story, and really.
I love that. I once said to a student, they couldn't get through a performance because they kept stopping every time there was a creak or a buzz or a string swiping noise. Yeah. And I said, you had me you had me under a spell. Yeah. I was totally under your spell. And the second you stopped and made a face and made a noise and looked unhappy, you broke the spell and you ruined it.
Broke the spell,
and I couldn't have cared less about that string noise you made. Yeah. And I said to the person, imagine some famous speech by Martin Luther King, Jr. or something, and in the middle of the speech, like I just did there, he stutters or he says something wrong and he immediately corrects himself, but the emotion is there and the sentiment is there, and then he stutters a little bit like I just did, but the message is so powerful and people are crying. And then imagine being in that audience and the speech finishes and you go, can you believe he stuttered on the word and? It's like, are you insane? Did you hear what he just said? It's like, it would be to completely miss the point. So I think, why shouldn't we try to go there in our playing? And isn't it such like a removal of all this weight in your shoulders? Because that's, for me at least, where nerves come from often, and the wrong mindset is walking out there thinking that I have to play like a CD, which are polished and you're not allowed to make a creak sound with your chair.
I was thinking it'd be nice to talk about Julian Bream.
I
was... at a concert Bream was playing, Julian Bream. I only saw him once, and again, like when I saw Segovia, is towards the end of his career, and he was someone I consider the greatest guitarist and even the greatest lute player of the 20th century, and not because he did everything correctly, but because if anyone could communicate emotion, it's Julian Bream. He's just absolutely incredible. And did I like everything he did? No, of course not. Everyone, you can't like everything a person does. I mean, most of it sometimes, but some of the things Bream did, I thought, wow, that's a bit questionable. I don't like that.
The very extreme Ponticello
effect exactly.
Can get a little comical.
But I didn't therefore think that lesser of him, because the intensity of his playing was so incredible.
I'm so jealous that you saw Bream and Segovia. Like the two of them are such pillars of our, the guitar royalty. How do you see Segovia in terms of his legacy and
it's a difficult one. Difficult because he was very single-minded and opinionated, and would stamp out anything that he didn't agree with. I think he was a difficult person, to be around, or would have been if I was around him, but it would have been difficult. But I think he told stories. We talk about storytelling. He was a great storyteller, and you can hear him when he's talking. He's telling stories, and you read his autobiography. He loves his own voice and telling stories, and there was some of that in him, and I didn't mind little mistakes in here and there. I didn't mind at all, because I was listening not to the guitar so much to the story that was behind what he was playing. And learning this new repertoire that I hadn't heard anyone play. Of course, you get more educated in different performance practices, and you begin to question a lot of things that he did and others did. Yes. And you think, well, why is he playing Purcell like that?
Right. The Robert Divisé arrangements seem to have nothing to do with the original pieces.
Yeah. And but now I've come round to the fact, or the point of view that he was being himself, and this is what we're trying to get people to be today. Be yourself. Don't be what everyone else is doing. Try and find. He had his own voice, and he put it out there in a big way, an egotistical way in many ways. But he was still a great player, but not in the way we gauge great players today. It was a different thing. But he wasn't, even in his own time, his playing was a little old-fashioned. Even in the early recordings, it was still, compared to what pianists were beginning to do, and cellists and violinists, he was just a little bit behind them. And he was very romantic in his outlook. And so he coated everything with the same brush. And when I was a student, we were trying, the typical classical guitar program at the time was 400 years of music. You start with some lute music, and a bit of classical, and then an incomprehensible, modern piece, and then some Spanish stuff at the end. And everyone was doing the same kind of program. And, he coated everything with the same brush, and which gave it some unity, and so it didn't seem so weird going into something a little bit experimental. He was never that outrageously experimental, as you know. But it was okay. Whereas we were trying to have different techniques for each era. So I'd use lute technique with my lute pieces, and Sor technique with my Sor, and so on. And every era had its differences, and we were trying to say this is the way it was, which is a nonsense, of course, And so I've changed a lot since then. I don't mind if I coat everything the same way. It's just the way I communicate and speak that's coming through now, not some historical awareness. I've been through all that. I feel I've come out the other side now, and I just want to open up and just play the way I feel it. The history of recordings and that we have from LPs and so on, I feel I'm free from all that. I'm free from Segovia's hold. I'm free from David Russell's hold, because he was a big name when I was a student. Everyone was trying to be David Russell, and nobody
wonderful.
managed it. We were all upset. Yeah. But you got to find your own voice. This is what it all comes down to. If you have your own voice.
Well, that's what's so nice about your channel, Rob, and it's why I keep coming back to watch it. Is there's no one who's doing what you're doing in the way that you're doing it, and I think your message of just kind of finding your authentic voice and sticking to it is inspiring for that reason. One of my takeaways from YouTube is I thought I was just uploading videos just to because people were doing it, and I was doing these recitals, and I just put my video there since 2007. Right, the year I started, I automatically started putting videos on, for better or for worse. And then over time, some videos just started doing well, and and I kind of accidentally fell into it and teaching on the platform. And what makes me do it and keep going is the fact that I see messages. I get the emails from people who they're starting classical guitar because they saw a video. They never even knew what a lute was, or let alone arch lute, baroque lute, all these things. And now they say, I love baroque lute music, and now I'm listening to personal songs with, I didn't even know what a countertenor was, and they're discovering it through, it's like show and tell, it's like a friend, hey, have you heard about this? And check this out. I love this, and maybe you will too. And that's not how I think about it. It's just, here are things I love, and maybe you like it too. And then there's a community that forms, and it's a vivid community that I feel, that I can talk to them. I know them by name, and it's a real thing. Not what I think maybe is viewed from the outside, this superficial ego platform. I don't view it that way at all. And so it's been very inspiring and rewarding for those reasons. So I plan on keep going and exploring, this new territory of online learning and online music appreciation. So how do you view it, and why do you do YouTube? I mean, at this point, why keep doing it? I think at some point you stopped, actually. I saw a video of you saying you're done, and then you kept going. So why keep doing YouTube?
Yeah. Well, first I'd like to say what you do very well.
Oh, thanks.
Your audience is sometimes different from my audience, and they're learning so much from you. It's great that you're actually explaining things. This is a baroque guitar, and whatever. And so keep doing what you're doing. Don't change it.
Thanks.
I don't get the sense that you're an egotist looking for attention. I don't get that. I hope you don't get it from me. I certainly don't feel that about myself. I'm there trying to say, have a listen to this. This is beautiful. I don't record anything I don't think is beautiful. And I just want to share it, and show and tell is a good way of describing it. And over time, yes, you do get a community. And yes, I'll admit it, over time I get students, and that's how I make my living. And talking about students, you were talking about your online course.
Yeah.
I have a couple of students, I won't name them, but they're my students and on your online course.
Wow.
They really loved it. And
so I have to hear that.
and they're students with me as well, and I encourage them. It's just go to all the teachers you can. And I can say this to all students, you can learn something, but be prepared to disagree with someone.
Exactly.
There's nothing wrong with that. If you've got a different idea, a different feeling about a piece, over time you've got to develop the strength to say, well, no, this is how I think it should go. Now, I'm not saying you should fight with your teacher, just listen to them, and they're giving their view. And then you can go to another teacher, get another view. You hear different players, they play differently. And you just absorb it all. But ultimately, you've got to find your way, doing this. And that is the big journey, is actually back to yourself. It's not out there to other people. It's me with this box with strings on it. How can we communicate? So forget everyone else. Listen to them, but absorb it all. But don't get hung up on it.
But that is the takeaway, I think, and I completely agree with you that I'm never upset when someone says they studied with a different teacher. I have one student who didn't tell me that they had a second teacher at the same moment, and I was surprised that they didn't tell me. And in the end, it was because they were worried I'd be upset. And I said, why would I be upset that you're acquiring all this information and getting so much feedback? It's great. Like, take it all in, absorb it like a sponge. For me, I've had more teachers than I could count. And all the master classes and the workshops and the YouTube videos and everything, but in person, constant lessons. And I couldn't be me and think like myself without all of them on my shoulders. I think about in various moments, one says, and remember when I told you this, and this person inspired me like this. But you are the amalgamation of all of them, plus then your own individual,
I also say to students, this is very important. The greatest teacher you can have is the score of music. You study the score. This is the thing. If you study technique in great detail and you become a virtuoso, you tend to coat everything with that technique.
Yeah.
But if you take each score as a unique thing in the universe, and it's a teacher, and it's trying to tell you what it wants, and you have to find a way to get that, with your hands. And so the score is teaching you how to play guitar, not you learning technique and throwing on the score, and I think that's where things have gone wrong somewhere. So I think I count among the teachers every piece of music I've ever read, because it's I have to try and find a way. I have to find out what the music is asking of me, and then I have to find a way of articulating that. And so, the score is my teacher, and I love thousands of teachers.
Often to my students, when I introduce them, I love introducing people to facsimiles. I've had very similar experiences as you when you go from only using modern editions in conservatories, and then being an early music player and just knowing how to easily go to IMSLP and open up the original facsimile and prefer that. Yeah. So I was just looking at Miguel Llobet facsimiles yesterday. And when you open up a facsimile, what I tell my students often is, why are you playing off of this PDF you found on the internet by Chad in Texas, when it's just his fingerings and he wrote his dynamics in, and you can't tell which of these fingerings were written by Taraga and one written by him, and he doesn't say which are which. When you can have the original, and Taraga from beyond the grave goes, hey, when you play this D, consider a fourth finger. But just by me writing 4 there, it tells you, I think that when you play like this, in this situation, in the context, I would use a 4. And in that way, it's a guitar lesson.
Yes, exactly. That's a guitar lesson. And they're all your teachers. Every score you look at. And it's great.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I'm sure my listeners will enjoy hearing your thoughts here. I think they're very poetic. And I think, at least in my personal experience, there's something in the big themes of what you've been pointing out that I think will help a lot of people. So I hope people will listen and try it out for themselves.
Well, I hope so. I've enjoyed the conversation. We'll probably both go away from here thinking of things we should have said.
I'm sure.
But we have our own channels we can do that on. So.
Yes. Well, I'll let you know next time I'm in Edinburgh, and I would love to meet you in person, and I'm sure we'd have a great time. So thank you for doing this.
It's a great city. And
one of my absolute favorites.
Are you? Where are you in the world?
I'm in Chicago.
Never heard of it. Kidding.
Yeah, I was born in Wisconsin, just a couple hours north. My dad's a dairy farmer, and then I moved to Chicago for my studies, and I just stayed here and developed a network and kind of kept going and now it's my hub, and I travel a lot for early music concerts. I'm in that phase now where you were talking about is you buy a lute and now you're suddenly a lute expert. So even though you can't tune it, so I had the same experience, and so now my performance life really is week to week playing a different program and traveling, and I'm loving it and trying to find balance between that and YouTube and all that.
Well, Chicago meant one thing for me musically. It was Muddy Waters. He went there and changed the world. His recordings are just unbelievable, the ones he made early in his life in Chicago. And I always, every time someone mentions Chicago, I think of Muddy Waters. He was a great thrill in my life. I just love the guy. So
I got to learn more about him. Blues and jazz, some other styles I've seen you play. They're styles I've never really got into. And
it's all just music. It's just music.
Totally, yeah. Before we go, where can people find out more about you? Is there a specific place people should check out to follow you?
Well, I have a specific classical guitar website, which is my initials RM, classicalguitar.com, which is devoted to my classical guitar and some lute stuff. Whereas robmacillop.net kind of covers everything I do, all sorts of instruments and so on. So I've got a few websites, but the main one I think for classical guitar students would be rmclassicalguitar.com. And from there you can get in touch with me if you need to talk or whatever. Anyway, I've loved this, so thanks for having me, Brandon.
You're very welcome. It's really my pleasure, and I think both of our YouTube audiences will enjoy this because they've been I can't tell you how many comments I've gotten saying, you got to talk to Rob MacKillop. So,
Well, I'll certainly be mentioning it to them.
okay, Rob, well, take care.
Yeah, you too.